A small white cube rests on a wooden table. Light touches its sharp edges. It looks harmless, almost pure. Someone drops it into a cup of tea. It disappears slowly. The liquid turns sweeter with a gentle stir. Today, we use it without thinking. We add it to coffee, bread, and cakes. It sits quietly in kitchens around the world. But there was a time when this white crystal changed history. It moved ships across oceans. It shaped nations. This is the story of sugar, a simple substance made from plants, a substance that altered the world. At first, sugar was rare, very rare. Most people had never tasted it. In ancient times, sweetness came from fruit and honey. Bees were the masters of sweetness. Humans simply borrowed from them. Then people discovered something unusual. A tall green plant held hidden sweetness inside. Its name was sugarcane. Sugarcane grew in warm lands. Its leaves were long and sharp. Its stalk was thick and full of juice. If you chewed the stalk, sweet liquid filled your mouth. It felt surprising, almost magical. Early farmers in South Asia learned this secret. They crushed the cane. They boiled the juice. Slowly, crystals began to form. Tiny grains of sweetness appeared. It looked like sand made of light. Few people knew how powerful this discovery would become. At first, it was simply a new taste, a rare pleasure. Merchants carried small amounts along trade routes. Caravans moved across dry deserts. Sugar traveled quietly in sacks. In ancient India, people refined the process. They improved the boiling method. They made cleaner crystals. The knowledge spread slowly westward. Travelers carried stories of this sweet substance. Curiosity followed the stories. In Persia, sugar became known among the wealthy. It was expensive. Only the rich could afford it. Doctors sometimes used it as medicine. They believed sweetness could heal. It was mixed with herbs and spices. In the early Middle Ages, sugar was still rare in Europe. Most people had never seen it. They did not even know its taste. Then came the Crusades. European soldiers traveled east. They discovered new foods and flavors. Among these discoveries was sugar. It was strange and exciting. It felt exotic and powerful. Returning soldiers brought stories home. They described sweet crystals from distant lands. People listened with wonder. Soon, small amounts reached European markets. They were sold in tiny portions. The price was extremely high. Sugar was not yet a common food. It was a luxury, a symbol of wealth. Kings served it at royal feasts. It decorated special dishes. It impressed important guests. Some cooks shaped sugar into sculptures. Castles and animals were formed from sweetness. They melted slowly under candlelight. But the strange part was, Europe could not grow much sugarcane. The climate was too cold. This created a problem. If people wanted sugar, they had to import it. And importing was expensive. Merchants began to see opportunity. Sweetness could bring great profit, if only they could grow it elsewhere. Explorers were already searching for new lands. Ships crossed unknown oceans. Empires looked for resources. Among gold and spices, sugar became a new goal. Not shiny like metal, but just as valuable. When Europeans reached tropical islands, they noticed something important. The climate felt perfect for sugarcane. Warm sun, heavy rain. On islands in the Atlantic, experiments began. Small sugar plantations were planted. The results were promising. Sugarcane grew tall and strong. The soil was rich. The sun was generous. But growing sugar required hard work. The cane had to be cut by hand. It had to be crushed quickly. The juice spoiled fast, if not processed. Boiling houses were built near the fields. Large metal pots bubbled day and night. Plantations expanded. Fields replaced forests. Sweetness began to shape the landscape. Owners needed many workers. The labor was heavy and exhausting. Under the hot sun, it was brutal. At first, some workers came from Europe, but many could not survive the harsh conditions. The work was too intense. Plantation owners searched for another solution. They looked toward Africa, and history began to change. Ships started crossing the Atlantic Ocean more frequently, but they did not carry sugar alone. They carried people. African men, women, and children were captured. They were forced onto ships. They were treated as property. The journey across the ocean was long and cruel. Many did not survive. The sea became a silent witness. Those who survived were sold in new lands. They were sent to work on sugar plantations. Their freedom was taken. Sugar production increased quickly. Plantations grew larger. Profits rose higher. European cities began to change. Shops displayed more sugar. Tea and coffee became sweeter. Few people in Europe saw the full picture. They tasted sweetness, but they did not see the suffering behind it. The demand kept rising. More sugar was needed. More plantations were built. The Caribbean became a center of sugar production. Islands transformed into vast fields of cane. Sweetness covered the horizon. What began as a rare luxury was becoming something else. Something powerful. Something dangerous. Sugar was no longer just a flavor. It was an engine of wealth. An engine of empire. Ships formed a new pattern across the ocean. Goods moved one way. Human lives moved another. This pattern would soon be called the triangular trade. But at the time, it was simply business. Profitable business. In European ports, sugar warehouses filled quickly. White crystals stacked in barrels. Money flowed through counting houses. In plantation fields, workers bent under the sun, cutting, carrying, crushing, day after day. Few people understood how deeply sugar would shape the modern world. It connected continents. It connected suffering and wealth. But this was only the beginning. The appetite for sweetness was growing, and nations were about to compete for it. Empires began to measure power not only in gold, but in sugar production, in acres of cane. Wars would soon touch these sweet fields. Rival nations would fight for control, all for something that melts in tea. What happened next surprised everyone. Sugar did not just sweeten food. It began to shape the fate of entire nations. By the 1600s, sugar was no longer rare in Europe. It was still expensive, but it was spreading quickly. Tea arrived from Asia. Coffee came from the Middle East. Chocolate traveled from the Americas. All three drinks were bitter at first. Many people did not like the taste. Sugar changed everything. A spoon of sugar softened the bitterness. Suddenly, these drinks became fashionable. Sweetness created new habits. Coffee houses opened in major cities. People gathered to talk and trade ideas. Sugar sat on every table. In London and Paris, sweet tea became popular. It was no longer only for royalty. The middle class began to enjoy it too. Demand grew faster than anyone expected. Plantations in the Caribbean expanded again. Forests were cleared for cane. On islands like Barbados and Jamaica, sugar ruled the land. Fields stretched toward the sea. Boiling houses smoked day and night. Plantation systems became more organized. Owners divided land into sections. Every task was timed and controlled. The work was harsh and dangerous. Sharp leaves cut skin. Hot sugar syrup burned flesh. Few people in Europe saw this reality. They saw only white crystals in porcelain bowls. They saw sweetness, not suffering. The triangular trade grew stronger. European ships carried goods to Africa. They exchanged them for human lives. Those lives were transported across the Atlantic. This journey was called the Middle Passage. It was filled with fear and pain. In the Americas, enslaved Africans were sold. Many were sent directly to sugar plantations. They were forced to work without pay. Sugar production became one of the most profitable industries in the world. Profits funded banks and businesses. Cities grew richer. Insurance companies developed to protect ships. Investors funded new voyages. Sugar touched every level of the economy. The strange part was, sweetness began to influence politics. Governments protected sugar interests. Nations fought over Caribbean islands. Control of sugar meant control of wealth. Even small islands became strategic prizes. Wars between European powers reached tropical shores. Cannons fired near cane fields. Plantations changed hands after battles. Sugar was no longer just a product. It was a reason for conflict. It was a reason for empire. In France, sugar profits supported royal spending. Luxury increased in royal courts. The elite enjoyed sweet desserts daily. But back on the plantations, conditions grew worse. Workdays were long. Punishments were severe. Enslaved communities found quiet ways to resist. Some slowed their work. Some preserved their traditions in secret. Songs were sung softly at night. Stories were passed from parent to child. Hope survived in small moments. Over time, new cultures formed in the Caribbean. African, European, and indigenous influences mixed. Music, language, and food changed forever. Sugar reshaped landscapes and societies. It redrew borders. It rewrote identities. In Britain, sugar consumption rose sharply. Ordinary families began to use it daily. Children grew up with sweetened porridge. Cheap sugar meant more baking. Cakes and jams became common. Sweetness entered everyday life. Factories later increased production. Refineries processed raw sugar into fine white crystals. Industrial power joined plantation labor. Ports like Liverpool and Bristol grew wealthy. Ships loaded and unloaded constantly. Sugar was part of their heartbeat. Few consumers connected their habits to distant suffering. They saw sugar as normal, as harmless. But critics began to speak out. Some religious groups questioned slavery. Moral doubts slowly grew. Pamphlets were printed. Meetings were held. Voices demanded change. The link between sugar and slavery became clearer. People realized their sweet tea carried a hidden cost. The truth was uncomfortable. In the late 1700s, rebellion erupted in one colony. It began in Saint-Domingue. Today, we call it Haiti. Enslaved people rose against plantation owners. Fires burned across cane fields. The air filled with smoke. The rebellion grew into a revolution. It became one of the most powerful slave uprisings in history. The world watched in shock. Sugar plantations were destroyed. French control weakened. A new nation was born. Haiti's independence sent a message. Enslaved people were not powerless. The system could be challenged. Plantation owners in other colonies felt fear. They tightened control. They tried to prevent rebellion. At the same time, abolition movements gained strength in Europe. Public opinion slowly shifted. The debate became louder. Britain eventually banned the slave trade in 1807. Later, slavery itself was abolished in British colonies. Other nations followed gradually. But sugar production did not end. Plantations searched for new labor systems. Indentured workers were recruited from India and China. The structure changed, yet exploitation often remained. Sweetness still carried complexity. Meanwhile, scientists searched for new sources of sugar. They experimented with sugar beets. They looked for plants that could grow in colder climates. In Europe, sugar beet farming expanded. Factories processed beet juice into crystals. Dependence on tropical cane decreased slightly. This innovation changed global trade. Countries without colonies could produce their own sugar. Power began to shift again. But the appetite for sweetness did not slow down. In fact, it increased. Industrial food production expanded rapidly. Candies became cheaper. Sweet pastries filled bakery windows. Children saved coins for sugary treats. Sugar was no longer a luxury. It was becoming ordinary, almost essential. Doctors began to notice something new. Dietary habits were changing. Sugar consumption was rising fast. But for now, sweetness still symbolized progress. It represented abundance. It represented modern life. Nations measured economic strength in production numbers. Sugar remained a valuable export. It shaped national budgets. Caribbean islands continued to depend on cane fields. Their economies were built on sweetness. Their futures were tied to global markets. The strange truth was clear. Sugar had built wealth for some, and deep inequality for others. It connected kitchens in Europe, to fields in the Caribbean, to ships crossing the Atlantic. It connected farmers, merchants, bankers, and rulers, all through tiny white crystals, all through sweetness. But sugar's influence was not finished. Its story was still unfolding. A new phase was coming. The world was entering the industrial age. Machines were growing louder. Factories were multiplying. And sugar was about to enter a new chapter, one that would reach into every home and into every body. Factories roared in the 1800s. Steel machines crushed and refined sugar faster than ever before. Production numbers climbed year after year. Railroads carried sugar inland. Steamships shortened travel time across oceans. Sweetness moved with new speed. In growing cities, workers needed cheap energy. Sugar provided quick calories. It was affordable and filling. Jams, syrups, and sweetbreads filled shop windows. Street vendors sold sugary snacks. Children licked sticky fingers. The strange part was, sugar was no longer rare or special. It was becoming normal. Industrial food companies began to experiment. They added sugar to canned goods. They sweetened sauces and cereals. Breakfast changed quietly. Plain grains turned into sweet flakes. Milk and sugar became partners. Advertisements appeared in newspapers. Bright posters promised happiness in every bite. Sugar was linked to joy. Families celebrated with cakes and pies. Birthdays and weddings became sweeter. Sugar entered traditions. Meanwhile, former colonies struggled economically. Many still depended on sugar exports. Global prices rose and fell unpredictably. When prices dropped, entire islands suffered. Jobs disappeared. Communities felt the shock. Few people connected this instability to centuries of plantation systems. The past still shaped the present. Sweetness carried history. In the late 1800s, new technology appeared. Chemists improved refining methods. Sugar became whiter and purer. White sugar became a symbol of quality. Darker sugar was seen as lower class. Color carried social meaning. In the United States, sugar joined a growing industrial food system. Large refineries dominated the market. Competition became fierce. Business leaders fought for control. Trusts and monopolies formed. Sugar shaped corporate power. At the same time, sugar beets expanded across Europe. Fields in Germany and France bloomed. Farmers found new income. Governments supported beet production. They wanted independence from tropical imports. Sugar became part of national strategy. But demand kept rising everywhere. People craved more sweetness. Habits had changed permanently. Soft drinks were invented in the late 19th century. Sweet syrups mixed with carbonated water. A new industry was born. Bottles traveled by train and truck. Sodas reached small towns and big cities. Fizz and sugar became inseparable. The 20th century accelerated everything. Mass production increased again. Sugar entered almost every packaged food. Candy bars appeared in colorful wrappers. They were cheap and portable. Workers carried them in pockets. During wartime, Sugar was rationed. Governments controlled supply. Sweetness became precious again. After wars ended, production surged back. Supermarkets expanded. Shelves filled with processed goods. Few people stopped to question the amount of sugar they consumed. It was hidden in sauces and breads. It was added quietly. Doctors began to study health patterns. They noticed rising cases of tooth decay. They observed changes in weight. Scientists debated sugar's role in disease. Some warned about long-term effects. Others focused on fat instead. The conversation grew complex. Nutrition became a public issue. Sugar entered scientific debate. Meanwhile, new sweeteners were developed. Corn syrup became popular in some countries. It was cheaper and easy to produce. High-fructose corn syrup entered soft drinks. It replaced traditional cane sugar in many products. The taste remained sweet. Large food corporations adapted quickly. They reformulated recipes. Profits remained strong. In tropical regions, cane farmers faced competition. Global markets shifted again. Economic pressure increased. Some plantations modernized. Machines replaced hand cutting. Labor patterns changed. But inequalities from the past did not disappear easily. Many communities remained poor. Sugar's legacy was complicated. At the same time, sugar shaped culture deeply. Holiday desserts became traditions. Sweet treats marked celebration. In films and advertisements, desserts symbolized comfort. Chocolate cakes and ice cream appeared everywhere. Sugar became emotional. The strange truth was clear. A substance once rare had become unavoidable. It filled kitchens and factories alike. Public health campaigns began to speak louder. Posters warned about excess sugar. Labels started to list ingredients clearly. Governments considered sugar taxes. Some countries acted. Prices changed again. Consumers slowly became more aware. They read nutrition labels. They counted grams. But habits are difficult to change. Sweet flavors are comforting. They remind people of childhood. Around the world, sugar consumption remained high. In some places, it even increased. Modern life encouraged convenience foods. Fast food chains expanded globally. Sodas and desserts traveled with them. Sweetness became global culture. In rural cane fields, harvest continued. Farmers cut tall green stalks. The cycle never stopped. Sugar refineries still operated near ports. Ships still carried crystals across oceans. Trade routes remained active. Few people remembered the full history behind their daily spoonful. The past felt distant. The sweetness felt immediate. But historians continued to study the impact. They traced links between sugar and empire. They examined its role in slavery. Museums displayed old plantation tools. Documents revealed trade records. Stories resurfaced. Communities demanded recognition of past injustices. Memorials were built. Conversations deepened. Sugar's story was not only economic. It was human. It was personal. From royal feasts to factory floors. From slave ships to supermarkets. Sugar had traveled everywhere. The journey connected continents. It reshaped diets and economies. It altered global power. But the final twist was still ahead. Sugar was about to face a new challenge, one that came from within. Medical research grew stronger in the late 20th century. Data linked high sugar intake to health risks. Public concern increased. New guidelines recommended moderation. Doctors advised balance. Governments updated nutrition advice. Yet sugar remained deeply woven into daily life. Removing it felt almost impossible. Sweetness had become habit. The same substance that built empires. Now shaped modern health debates. Its power had transformed. What once drove ships across oceans now filled plastic bottles in refrigerators. History had changed form, but the full meaning of sugar's journey was still waiting to be understood, and the reflection was just beginning. Today, a child unwraps a candy bar. The foil shines in the light. The moment feels simple and joyful. Few people think about ships crossing oceans. Few imagine plantations under a burning sun. The sweetness feels immediate, but the history is still there. It lingers quietly behind each bite, hidden in plain sight. Sugar helped finance empires. It strengthened banks and ports. It fueled expansion across continents. It also carried suffering. It shaped systems of slavery. It left deep marks on societies. The strange part was, something so small changed something so large. A crystal shaped nations. In modern supermarkets, sugar appears in many forms. White, brown, powdered, hidden in sauces and drinks. Food labels list long ingredients. Some names are difficult to recognize, but sweetness remains present. Scientists continue to study its effects. They measure blood sugar levels. They analyze long-term health patterns. Public health campaigns encourage awareness. They suggest balance. They promote mindful eating. At the same time, sugar farmers still rise before sunrise. They walk through tall green cane fields. They harvest as generations did before. In former plantation regions, history is remembered carefully. Museums tell difficult stories. Communities seek healing. Conversations about justice continue. Descendants of enslaved people share their voices. The past is not forgotten. Sugar also shaped migration. Workers moved across oceans. New cultures were formed. Music, language, and cuisine carry these influences. Caribbean rhythms echo history. Sweet desserts tell stories of survival. The legacy is complex. It is not only dark or bright. It is deeply human. Sugar connected Africa, Europe, Asia, and the Americas. It built global trade networks. It created modern capitalism. It changed daily habits. It reshaped taste preferences. It altered diets worldwide. It even influenced political decisions. Laws were written around it. Wars were fought over it. And yet, it dissolves in seconds. It melts in tea. It disappears quietly. This contrast is powerful. Something that melts so easily, once hardened into systems of control. Today, we have more choice. We can learn from history. We can decide how much sweetness we want. We can understand where our food comes from. We can ask difficult questions. We can read beyond the label. Few people imagine that sugar once cost as much as gold. Few realize it shaped the map of the world. But it did. From royal tables in Europe to cane fields in the Caribbean, sugar left its mark. From slave ships crossing the Atlantic to factory lines in the industrial age, its influence continued. From colonial profits to modern health debates, its story keeps evolving. The sweet taste we enjoy today carries layers of history, layers of power and pain, but it also carries resilience. Communities survived and created culture. Life continued despite hardship. What began as a tropical plant became a global force. Few could have predicted that. Now, the question is different. Not how to find more sugar, but how to understand it. Understanding does not remove the past, but it brings clarity. It invites responsibility. The story of sugar is not only about taste. It is about trade. It is about human choices. It reminds us that everyday objects can carry extraordinary histories. Even a simple white cube. Next time sugar falls into your cup, you might pause for a second. You might remember the journey. You might picture tall green cane fields. You might imagine ships on wide oceans. You might think of unseen hands. History does not always shout. Sometimes it dissolves quietly, just like sugar in tea. The sweetness remains. But so does the story. It waits to be remembered. If this story surprised you, Take a moment to reflect. Many everyday items hold hidden histories. And if you're curious about the world behind simple things, stay with us for more journeys like this. There's always more beneath the surface.